Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's turn to politics in the U.S. and an interesting story in the presidential race this week. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, the Teamsters union, which says it has about 1.3 million members, is declining to endorse a presidential candidate. Statement on Wednesday from the Teamsters executive board said that it had received few commitments on top Teamsters issues from either former President Donald Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris, and no definitive support among members for either party's nominee. This is getting some notable pushback on both sides. On one side, you have the Teamsters' former leader, James P. Hoffa, calling this a critical error and a failure of leadership, saying there's only one candidate that has supported unions throughout her career. That is Vice President Kamala Harris. On the other side, the Teamsters' current president, Sean O'Brien, getting questions on why not endorse Donald Trump, since that's what the polling of his own membership seems to suggest is the favored position. Here he is on Neil Cavuto's show on Fox.
When 2 out of 3 of your members prefer Donald Trump, now it's a telephone survey, I grant that, but that trend has been around for a while where members tend to favor more the Republican candidate than the Democratic candidate, but that's a pretty overwhelming shutout right there.
We evaluated everything. We evaluated the straw poll, which was done in person, which, as you know, when you have an audience, you can influence that audience. We figured that was going to lean heavily towards President Biden, and it didn't lean heavily towards him. And then we did the poll where 40,000 of our members participated in that. That's a 60% poll, the other 58% poll that you see. And then we did the research-based polls. And you know, 2 out of those 3 polls leaned Republican. So again, I'll get back to, there's a lot of work that got to be done. Our members are paying attention. And again, a no endorsement, I think, sends a message to both parties that if they truly want to support working people, they have to reevaluate it and understand that nothing is given, it is earned.
Kim, your column in Friday's newspaper is on this under the headline, The Teamsters Lesson for Trump. What's the argument that you're making?
Well, first of all, just on this decision that the Teamsters made, the way you set that up was perfect because it highlights the tension that's going on, and it's becoming much more pronounced, in particular in trade unions, blue-collar unions, which is this. You have a union leadership that is very, very liberal, left-wing, and that is laser focused on simply which party is going to give the biggest handout, the biggest benefit, the biggest leg up to union priorities. And so they are almost reflexively every election cycle in favor of Democrats who, of course, do say that all the time. You know, they're heavily biased against corporations. They stock their administration full of officials who always come down on the side of unions and union elections, or coming up with new rules to disadvantage corporations. We had the Biden administration manage a huge pension bailout for trade union pensions as part of his American Rescue Plan. That's what they're focused on. The workers, especially blue-collar workers, who we know tend to be and have increasingly become Trump voters, are looking at a lot broader stuff. They're looking at the economy and inflation. They're looking at cultural issues. They're looking at global disorder. And they're very unhappy with Democrats at the moment. They don't feel as though Democratic administrations are in general on the side of working people. You also have to remember, as a lot of union members, I live among a lot of them, they're all American. They actually like competition. They like a free economy. And so they are just naturally inclined toward a lot of Republican positions. So what you ended up happening here is that it was real cop-out in the end on the Teamsters' part. Good for them that they asked their members what they thought. But then when their members came in and 60% of them registered for Trump and they had a board meeting, they just kind of wiggled out of it by, there were 14 votes for no endorsement, 3 votes for Harris, and then they blamed it on neither side giving enough assurances on things like strike protections for workers, etc. It didn't come down to that. It's much more complicated. My argument here is that Trump, as he goes about right now, trying to mimic Democrats with all these giveaways to unions, no taxes on overtime and no taxes bonuses on tips, and he's getting pushed by members of his inner circle to, adopt minimum wage rules or back away from right to work, all to try to curry the union vote. My argument is it was his administration last time around, those broad principles of free market conservatism that attracted all these union members to him in the first place. They were there well before he started offering these little handouts, and it would serve him much better in the future to recognize that and to not deviate too much from his Reagan policies of the first term.
This tension, though, within the union movement is interesting, and part of it seems to be a disconnect between many of the rank and file and then the leaderships of these organizations. And it also, I think, has something to do with the new union movement. The United Auto Workers, for example, issuing statements about the war in Gaza. Why would the United Auto Workers have an interest in that? Well, the answer, it seems to be, is that the United Auto Workers has found a pretty good sideline in signing up members on college campuses in academic settings. A pretty good chunk of its membership now is no longer the kind of blue-collar car workers that the name United Auto Workers calls to mind, which creates a tension inside the organization. And Elliot, I wonder if this is a warning to Democrats, maybe not specifically for 2024, though I'm sure there are plenty of union members in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania who are paying close attention to this, but even for the longer term, because many of these union members have been a pretty solid Democratic constituency, but they're being pushed away, I think, by policies like these green mandates that are putting the traditional car companies under strain, stuff like intersectionality, cultural issues. It's a blue-collar appeal that I think much of the Democratic Party is at risk of losing here.
The tensions are real. I mean, if grad students are a big part of your base and they're active and they're involved, and they're even increasingly what you mean when you speak of workers and union members, well, you're going to end up with a different flavor of politics. And a lot of what used to be known as union workers aren't going to like it. I mean, I think both parties need to remember that it's not enough to appeal to union leaders. You have to actually appeal to union members. And their interests are different. I mean, union leaders have an interest in reducing workers' rights. Union members don't have that interest. So when union leaders make their major priority something like the PRO Act with its focus on changing the ways that workers can vote for a union with card check, getting rid of a secret ballot, I mean, is that what the average union member cares about? No, he cares about his own working conditions and pay and those issues. And also, he's an American. Appeal to him as an American, as a worker, speak his language as a union member. But the kinds of things that a union leader wants to hear are very different. And while the union leaders still have power and still matter because they have control over a lot of dues money, which goes into politics, a lot of other things, the union workers vote. And nobody can vote for them, at least not yet.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.